And it was Anthony Damasio, the neuroscientist, who wrote in one of his books, "We're not thinking creatures who feel, we're feeling creatures who think." And I think understanding that about us as humans, first and foremost, is just incredibly powerful, because when we do that, I think we can start to spot the emotional patterns that we go through. So rather than just sort of playing out the same patterns time and time again, it's that pause, that stop, that thinking. And Ray Dalio, in his book Principles, he has a lovely saying in there that everything changed when he went from saying "I'm right" to "how do I know I'm right?" And it's that ability to stop and say, what's going on? One of my favorite questions I love asking people is, will you tell me something that I don't seem to realize about this situation? And every time I did it with my daughter the other day, and every time I do that, you just like sit there and something comes back and it's like, oh, didn't see that coming. And it's just like really valuable things just to sit with and to reflect on and to think about that.
Caspar, you are very welcome to the ScaleX Insider Podcast. Absolutely delighted and thrilled to have you on the show.
I'm thrilled to be here, Brendan. Looking forward to our conversation.
Likewise, I had the wonderful privilege of connecting with you last month in person when you came out and joined our ScaleX Adventure tribe, and we heard your incredible story. You shared with us incredible wisdom, so I'm looking forward to having that shared with our wider audience today. So you know very well our vision is to inspire, connect and enable millions of ambitious leaders of small to medium-sized enterprises to scale with purpose. So Caspar, what does scaling with purpose mean to you?
So I've listened to a few of your episodes before, and I've heard that question. And as I was thinking about that, the word that comes up for me is intentionality, and just being sort of setting that. I never used to be like this in life, but it's just it's something that's developed over time. It's just getting so clear where you want to be in the future, 5 years out, 10 years out, what that means to you, why you're going after that. And rather than just letting life happen by accident, it's going after it with intentionality. And I think when it comes to scaling businesses, you've got to know why you're doing it, the impact you're going to have, the people you're going to be on the journey with, and just being really present to that. Of course, allows space for serendipity to arrive and magic like that. But intentionality is the word that comes up for me.
I love that. Yes, intentionality and being clear on where you're going, and importantly, why you're going there. So speaking of journeys and being intentional, I mean, your life has been one hell of a journey to date. For those not familiar with your work, I would love you to share an abridged version up to the point that you felt compelled to write the big, bold mindset, rethinking the rules of leadership. For those who are listening, you'll not be able to see me holding up one of Caspar's many books, and I encourage you all to go out and grab a copy of this. But we've heard so much about mindset, and there's so much about mindset out there. Share with us your journey and what has flavored and colored your thinking around mindset, which compelled you to write something that you felt was worthy of being read.
Okay. So I'll do a little bit of background and then straight into the mindset piece. A little bit of biography. Start off in life. First half of life was sort of conventional degree, trained as an accountant, economics degree, trained as a chartered accountant, a number of years in investment banking. And to the point about serendipity is in 2000, I wasn't looking for any change in my life, but I suddenly came across this yacht race, the BT Global Challenge, described as the world's toughest yacht race. And without even knowing it, I suddenly found myself signed up, and I was on this race around the world. Sometimes things just come across you and you have to grab hold of them. At this stage, I was not intentional, by the way, going back to our first word. And so that completely took me out of my comfort zone. The race was, the mantra was ordinary people doing extraordinary things. I'm an ordinary person, right? There's nothing special about me. I've just chosen to go and do some things which take me out of my comfort zone, which comes back to the mindset piece. And so, having been sort of, what I would say is a steady sort of B grade student, and that was the identity and the story that I had in my head about who I was. I then found myself just surrounded by the most extraordinary people and going on this boat around the world where, we went through hurricanes, we went through 100-foot waves, and you're at sea for 40 days with a whole bunch of strong personalities. And it was, a life-changing experience because it put me into circles, environments, got me thinking about stuff that I would never, ever have done before. So that was kind of like my first stepping out of the norm. Came back from that. I was working for KPMG at the time, and I did another year with them before I actually then left to go and start my own businesses. Various, built a number of different ventures, some successful, some unsuccessful. That's the way it goes. And as your listeners will all know. And in the process of building one of those, hatched a second idea with my wife to go and sail around the world a second time, but with our three kids under the age of 10. And that was a 5 years of preparation, 2 years of making it happen. So this is when intentionality absolutely came into my world. And I had to be intentional about my home life and also hyper intentional about my work life as well, because I had to reach an exit by a certain point in time and create a certain amount of value. So one of my mantras is nothing ever happens without a deadline. So you put a deadline on something and it's an important deadline and you know exactly why you're going to go and do it, then that forces the whole agenda. So fast forwarding, we went sailed around the world, but we made that happen, built the business, sold the business actually from the middle of the Pacific Ocean. We can dive into all these things, of course. And then sailed around the world for 2 years doing that. And huge amounts of insights, huge amounts of lessons from that, building a team with my family at the same time as building a team with work, lots and lots of parallels there. But then since coming back from that, reflecting, writing, you mentioned I've written a number of books now. And for me, it was that opportunity to sort of think about, okay, well, what do we need to do differently in our world today? How do we need to think about it? And as I reflected, it was very different from when I came into the workplace in the 1990s. And so for me, that's the essence of this mindset piece. And, one of my favorite sayings, you can't navigate a new world using an old set of charts. And so therefore, for me, that's the mindset upgrade I think we need to have to tackle the challenges of today. And for me, it's thinking bigger and bolder than we've ever done before. There's lots of things and we can unpack those, but basically that was the catalyst. It was reflecting on what we did differently with our experiences and then saying, well, how does that overlay with the business world when you're scaling businesses in today's day and age? What do you need to do differently? I'll pause for breath there, but that's been a bit of the journey.
You've set the context beautifully there. So there's a number of things that I'm going to extract from that. One is teamwork. The other is this sense of getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And for you, the importance of actually coming out of our comfort zone. And thirdly, I want to get your view on what are the challenges today versus the challenges of the 90s and how we kind of reprogram our mindset. I think a good place to start is, what do you understand by mindset? How would you define mindset?
So for me, I mean, the simplest level, mindset is clearly how you think about things. And I guess, when I ask myself that question right now, what comes up to me, it goes right back to the Carol Dweck notion of mindset. And I think about, where I was before with a fixed mindset and, being that identity that I had about being a B grade student. And for me, it was all about looking good, or rather about not looking stupid. And it was just preserving a fixed identity. And now for me, the mindset, which again, Carol Dweck perfectly wrote about in Growth Mindset, it's embracing that, learning that humility, walking into the sort of those things that we don't know, embracing those things that we don't know. So I take the word mindset in that context. And I think the only thing that I layer on top of that then is that the day and age we're in forces us to, I think on that really big and bold level, to be super ambitious I don't think I think we'll challenge unless we'll struggle in our businesses unless we do that. So it's the fusion of those two different pieces together.
So our listeners will be very familiar with this, the concepts of growth mindset versus fixed mindset. I certainly maintain, given that it's the very first principle of our 10 principle scaling framework, that your psyche either empowers or disempowers your scaling trajectory, your scaling success. What do you know now about mindset that you didn't know prior to embarking, let's say, on a round the world yacht adventure with your family? What do you latch on to now in those moments of discomfort in terms of supporting a growth mindset as opposed to recoiling back into this familial place of comfort?
So one of the places my study, my research has taken me into is a deep dive into the world of trauma and really understanding how our emotional experiences shape us, because those are the instinctive reactions that we come up with when we're faced with any particular situation. So I read a lot, I go to a lot of conferences, and look, I'm not a trauma expert, but I think it has so many different insights for us in terms of how we approach things. And it was Anthony Damasio, the neuroscientist, who wrote in one of his books, "We're not thinking creatures who feel, we're feeling creatures who think." And I think understanding that about us as humans, first and foremost, is just incredibly powerful, because when we do that, I think we can start to spot the emotional patterns that we go through. So rather than just sort of playing out the same patterns time and time again, it's that pause, that stop, that thinking. Ray Dalio, in his book Principles, he has a lovely saying in there that everything changed when he went from saying "I'm right" to "how do I know I'm right?" And it's that ability to stop and say, what's going on? One of my favorite questions I love asking people is, will you tell me something that I don't seem to realize about this situation? And every time I do, I did it with my daughter the other day. And every time I do that, you just like sit there and something comes back and it's like, oh, didn't see that coming. And it's just like really valuable things just to sit with and to reflect on and to think about that. So I think it's about understanding our own internal inner journey and therefore how do we react to things. I think the science is definitely moving on in terms of our understanding of this, and I think it's got so many insights for people wherever they are in the world and whatever their situation.
So you've mentioned something there, and certainly in the work that we have done, we also would agree and acknowledge that trauma triggers change. What I'm always encouraging our listeners to do is to trigger that change before the trauma occurs. Don't wait to go to rock bottom before you actually enact the change that you knew intuitively you were going to have to do at some point in time. But often we see it so many times, the person only gives up smoking when they're diagnosed with a heart condition or lung cancer, and they know that smoking is intuitively bad, but they continue to do this until they're given that diagnosis. What do you know are the common beliefs that people hold on to that are actually impeding their both their personal and their professional scaling success? And what we'll come to is how we start to kind of overcome those limiting beliefs. What do you see as the most common?
It's usually fears, isn't it, which come up as terms of limiting beliefs. We hear about fear of failure, fear of success, the fear of feeling uncomfortable, and the answer is always going into the cave, isn't it? So the cave you don't want to go into is the cave that you must go into, and it's those things which just come up time and time again. But I think Yeah, no, we've literally got all of those things. And I think, one of the things that, links together all of those fears, that human response, is in that moment believing that our feelings are telling us the real truth. But feelings are transitory, aren't they? And it's like, I have an example this morning. So I had an interaction with my wife today, and we are talking about something, and she just paused and she said, "Are you all right?" And it's like, and I said, actually, something's just like triggered me. And she said, "Yeah, I know." And she could see it obviously. And she said, What do you want to say about it?" And I said, "I don't know yet. I'm sensing something, but I haven't got words to put to it." So she said, "Oh, well, just give me 5 minutes." And then 5 minutes later, I could actually start to articulate that. And the moment that I articulated, we then had a conversation around it. And then actually, it's in the past now. It's already gone. But just recognizing these things come up, they're transitory. Okay, well, let's just bring that out. And I think the challenge so much of us struggle with is that we can't always put clear logic, clear thinking to those sensations that we have. And so it's being able to bring those out. And then the moment we can do that, I think we can move on much more rapidly. And I think that notion applies to every situation we face, doesn't it? But I think the key word for me is the self-awareness around this, to be able to notice that I'm having an emotional experience and just like talk about that so we can come through that. And yeah, the repeating patterns, whether it's that fear of failure, that I keep doing this, I built a business to this level, and then suddenly something happens to it and I can't then get back to, or can't push on through to the next level. So it's that self-awareness to notice those things. And that's why other people around you, coaches and groups exactly as you're doing, to hold the mirror up and say, well, what's the thing that I can't see? So I don't know. I think I've gone a bit of a ramble there, but I think it's
No,
really
you
important
haven't.
to know emotional experience.
You haven't at all. What's really profound in all of that is the understanding that emotions aren't facts.
Hmm.
It's simply a feeling, and I love that term, kind of emotion is energy in motion. It's just a signal in your body, and something that you referenced earlier is the importance of actually embracing discomfort. And I often find that that feeling that we get, that really unnerving feeling, and I still get it, public speaking before you go on
Hmm.
stage, is a signal that beyond this, there is growth about to happen. Now, of course, there are times when you receive this feeling and there is a true danger, but that is such a small percentage of the time. The vast majority of the time, your body's interpreting something as dangerous when in fact it's growth.
Hmm.
What's what do you encourage people to do to lean into this discomfort? Not everyone listening will decide at the end of this to take their family around the world on a yacht adventure, which is just mind blowing in itself. But what can our leaders do practically to start to lean in a little more to getting comfortable with being uncomfortable?
Yeah, look, there's lots of things around that, and yeah, I hope no one goes off on a boat with their kids around the world, because it's a crazy thing to do. Clearly, it's a lot of fun. The What can you do around it? I think one of the first things, I have a notebook just on the other side of my desk over there, which I call my emotions notebook. And whenever I'm feeling something, strong emotion, whatever, I literally write it down in there. My brain then knows, oh, okay, you've heard that, you've acknowledged that. And then my brain just calms and quietens down, and I don't need to respond to that. I think so many emotions are what I would call legacy emotions, that we've had that experience in the past, and our nervous system has been trained to respond to that, even though that threat was, 40 odd years ago. And we don't need to do that now. So for me, just that very simple act of writing it down can be very, very powerful. So that's the first thing. Um, Second thing is, I think, what I was saying about my discussion I had with Nicola this morning, is knowing that it's really hard sometimes to put those feelings into words, because they're two different systems. There's our feel something, we feel a tightness in the chest or in our gut or whatever else, but that doesn't translate immediately to words. Words are really inelegant ways of sort of expressing that. So sometimes just staying with that and just like, scribbling down or thinking about, well, what words would I say around this, but not forcing it. So if the situation this morning with Nicola, if I'd forced words there when she'd first asked me, I think I would have missed the mark, and I would have misdescribed what was actually going on for me. So that little bit of space just to sort of figure out what's going on there. So that's probably the second thing, that bit of space to play with it. And look, I'm sort of a massive fan of doing the therapeutic journey, and that can take many different forms. Whether that's coaching, whether that's mastermind group, whether that's going to seeing traditional therapy, but just that place where it's safe to express those things, to explore those things. Something I've done for a long time now, and it's one of the most powerful things I think I know, just to get that peace of mind, that clarity of thought around those different things. Oh, and a fourth one to throw in there as well, I meditate as well, and I find that's very helpful to help me gain peace of mind and perspective on things.
Tell me a little bit more about the therapy or the coaching. What form does it take?
So I guess my journey through therapy stuff started with coaching, and I remember the first time going into a coaching conversation, and so basically we sort of, in one of the early businesses I was running, we took on a business coach, and I remember sitting there across the table with my arms folded. It's like, I'm here, but I'm not really going to tell you anything. It's like, this all sounds a bit airy fairy, sort of BS type stuff to me, and the irony now that
the first limiting belief.
Yeah, exactly. It's those things there. So it started with coaching, and that just sort of started to tap into that whole fixed mindset thing about being open and being able to start sharing stuff that's your inner world with other people, and that's okay. You don't have to defend that. You don't have to protect that. It's okay to share that with people. So that was where it started, and then it went to sort of therapy, and just sort of one-on-one sort of talking to psychologists and just sharing things. And so it started, I guess, with talk therapy, and then when I got to a plateau with that where I wasn't creating breakthroughs, then a friend recommended me to go to other things beyond talk therapy, so kinesiology, EMDR. There's a whole range of different things, but they tap into the sense that we don't just hold these things at a cognitive level, we hold these things at a whole body level. So Bessel van der Kolk wrote the book, The Body Keeps the Score. And the point is, these emotional experiences which shape everything, they're just literally stored at that cellular level in our bodies. So it's taken me on a journey through to that. But any of those, they're all different starting points. And it's just, uncovering those things which shape you. So in any particular situation, you can say, okay, well, actually, what's the optimal cognitive choice that I want to take, rather than just responding at an emotional level, so you can be much more intentional, to go right back to the top of the conversation. So,
is there one therapeutic modality that is your go-to?
Currently, it's kinesiology. So that's basically the notion that different things are held in our body at different places. So you're being asked questions, and different parts of your body are being manipulated. And so I always hold stress here in my right shoulder up here, and there'll be reasons why that is. So, but I think it's different things at different times, and it's trying something and it's running with that. And when it gets to a point where it's plateaued and it's not creating any more breakthroughs, then it's trying something else. So, and it's interesting, actually, a conversation with Nicola yesterday. Well, she was saying, was there only one particular point that shifted everything? It's been a whole accumulation of different things at different points in time. So it doesn't really matter where you start on the journey. It's just trying stuff and pulling on that thread to see what it unlocks.
What do you tell yourself now to move from that mindset that I am a B grade student to actually starting, scaling, selling multiple businesses, to sailing around the world, not once but twice, to speaking on huge stages around the world, to authoring books, putting them out into the world? That's not consistent with a B grade student. So what process did you go through to move from B grade to feeling, to really empowering yourself to say, you know, I am a top A grade person, whatever that looks like. People will get that language, but in whatever context that applies, I am an A grade person. How do you do that if it's so embedded that actually, no, I said in this class, you know, I got this paper back. I'm a B. You know, I don't care what others are telling me about how great I am or whatever. I can be whatever I want to be. I got that B, and it's so heavily embedded in my mindset. How do we short circuit? You know, for our listeners, you've gone through an incredible journey. What process would you take our listeners through so that they can ditch this B grade mindset and adopt an A plus mindset?
Okay, great. So look, I'll tell you the catalyst where that came from. I'll tell you the book that I went to, and then I'll tell you the journey and how it unfolded.
Brilliant.
So it was all couched within that 5-year plan to go and sail around the world. And we got 2 years into that plan, 2 years into the 5-year growth plan, and nothing was changing. That was the point I started doing loads of things, pulling on loads of different levers in the business. And I was just like running very, very fast. My business partner came and took me to one side. He said, Caspar, you're being a nightmare. He wasn't quite as polite as that, it was a bit more direct. And basically said, unless you change, unless you do something different, I and the rest of the business are going to go and leave.
Wow.
Ouch. And so sometimes it's like you need a very powerful catalyst to force you to go and do that piece of work, whatever that is. So certainly I did, to go on that journey. And it left me no option. I had to go into that cave. Otherwise, the whole family sailing plan, all those things was not going to go and happen. So started getting really interested in that whole field of the coaching field, getting that feedback. One particular book that popped up for me, recommended by Dan Kennedy, the US renegade millionaire guy. He's a bit Marmite. Sadly, he's dead now. But the book was Psycho-Cybernetics by Professor Maxwell Maltz.
It's a super book.
Great book, isn't it? I mean, that was the book, right? So he talks in there about this whole concept of the theater of the mind and scripting out that story, that identity. That was the exact process that I went through. So imagining myself sitting in the front row of the cinema, seeing the film, seeing the movie playing of my life on the screen in front of me, and then saying, okay, I need to write the script now for that person who's showing up on the screen, which was not the person that I had the script for before. That was the B grade person. So I literally had to rewrite that narrative, that script, that identity shift of who I was and how I wanted to show up in the world. That was a very, very intentional thing that would have not happened by accident. That was very specific, conscious, and deliberate. I remember Dan Kennedy saying, I wasn't this Dan Kennedy guy. I went and created him. And it's kind of like that. Well, it's exactly like that. It's exactly what I did. And the central building block of that was developing the identity of being a learner. At home in our kitchen, which is just through the other side of that wall there, we have this huge, great big painting, which we created together as a family. And it says, we are learners. And it illustrates with pictures drawn by the kids of all the different ways that we can learn. It's all about trying, failing, moving forwards, and all those sorts of things. Because I came to the realization that being a learner is the most bulletproof identity there is. Because if you're a learner, it doesn't matter what happens to you. You take the punch in the face. Okay, great. What can I learn from that? You get up and you keep going on. Whereas if your identity is tied to specific things, then that's really fragile. So for me, it was anchoring that, and literally above the sink in our kitchen, this picture here. So I'm kind of like indoctrinating the kids as well with that whole thing. But I think it's the most powerful identity that any of us can develop. So it didn't happen by accident. It was very specific and deliberate, and that has basically just been the underpinning of the whole journey.
Oh, I absolutely love that. And if I knew now, approaching my 50s, what I did, if I knew back, 20 years ago, what I do now in the context of your words matter, in relation to the kids, for example, my eldest now is on his 21, 19 and 17. And Aristotle said, give me the boy until he's 7 and I'll show you the man. You know, our words matter. So the fact that you're indoctrinating your kids with this mindset that they're learners is so really powerful. So I'm just going to recap on this. You had a 5-year vision. So you set out the vision to your team with clarity of where you wanted to go. It sounds like you put a plan in place and you were busy running around the business, creating chaos in the context of executing that plan, to the point that you encountered the trauma moment where, you know, one of your fellow shareholders, leaders, stakeholders said, Caspar, enough. We're, you know, either you change or we're leaving. So that was the trauma moment. You sought then, you know, to go inside. I suspect there was a little bit of defense initially that, no, you need to change, not me, bucko. I suspect there's a little bit of that.
All of that.
Okay, without making assumptions, of course. But you then were encouraged.
How dare you say those things to me?
Of course, yeah. Who do you think you are to tell me? You know, you're not that good either.
You go do work. Yes, it's push it off, isn't it?
So I think we've all been there. But in your wisdom, you decided to actually take this on board and seek counsel elsewhere in the form of some self-coaching, discovered the book Psycho-Cybernetics, and decided actually to lean into what was being said in that book about us having self-agency to write whatever script for our lives we want to write. And up until this point, you had a B grade script that you were replaying every day, same old pattern, likely, and again, I'm making assumptions, wanting to prove yourself by doing everything, by letting very little go. And
exactly what you said. Yep.
So, yeah, and deciding that actually you would write a different script in the context of saving yourself, to save your team, save this business, and play out a different outcome. That is so incredibly powerful. Adopting a mantra is what I'm hearing of. I am a learner. I'm a learn-it-all, not a know-it-all, essentially. And ultimately, everything then that you lean into is an opportunity to learn something about yourself, about others, about the world around you in many respects. I think it's, as I'm saying this, I'm kind of coaching myself here, because it's the catch-all for actually leaning into everything.
Yes, it is. That's exactly. And I think, one of the, linking that together with the whole emotional response piece as well, is that it's just creating a hunger for that feedback. What are those things that I can't see? And rather than being afraid of those things and taking them as body blows when you get that bit of feedback, it's like, oh, okay, there's something really interesting in here that I can, take note of. And that only comes from adopting that learner's mindset. So you're actively going out there and searching for those different things. And it's, the people I interviewed for the book and the people I studied, I see that pattern time and time again. People who go out there and just achieve incredible things, they all have that humility, they all have that hunger, that curiosity to say, okay, tell me what I can't see. It's that.
That's lovely. Tell me what I can see. I mean, again, comes back to the old cliche, you can't read the label on the jar if you're inside the jar. Practically, what did you go through? Initially, there's the hackles go up, you defend your position, you reject vehemently the criticism that has just been levied at your door. How long was this process, and when did you actually invite, and did you invite then a conversation with your fellow stakeholders to say, okay, I'm open to hearing from you how I should be better here in this business, how I should show up in this business. Practically, what did that look like? Because I think this is really important.
So look, so the key work for me was in the construct of having that 5 year personal goal and having made that commitment to my wife, to my kids, that we were going to go and set on a boat. And before that, I had always said, oh, I'm going to build a business and exit it in 5 years' time. And that 5 years was like that far away from me. And whatever point in time, it was always 5 years away. So 6 months later, it was still 5 years away. And I kept kicking the can down the road. I kept avoiding the real question. So literally, we had the 1st of August 2014 ingrained on our kitchen wall as the date we're going to go and get on a boat and we're going to go and do it. So rather than being 5 years being further away, it was getting closer and closer and closer. And suddenly it's like, oh, okay, that date's not moving now, is it? So it was setting up that situation, that promise, that commitment to my family that we were going to go and do this. If I didn't have that, it's likely I would have ducked the issue and I wouldn't have gone through the pain points to go and make it happen. So it was leaning into that discomfort. And when my business partner said that to me, we're all going to go and leave, it took me some weeks to really understand that and process that. And when I really understood that, it's like the trip is not going to happen unless I get the business moving to go, because we didn't have the money. I mean, that's the other thing. When we came up with the plan, most people assume I'm sort of, slightly sort of a posh middle class sort of bloke with bucket loads of money. I would have earned more money stacking shelves than Tesco's back in the day, and so it was ridiculous. We didn't have a boat or anything like that, and so it was that realization that I had to do something different. And it's a classic thing, is you have to get to rock bottom before you're actually going to do something different. And it was like, I've made this commitment here. I don't want to do this, but actually I had to go and do it. So then that took me into the coaching journey. And we had this lady called Margaret who came and did the coaching with us. And actually it was almost like sort of marriage guidance for business partners. And she'd sit there with the two of us and getting the different things out. It was that journey there. And then the things she teased out of us and got us to face those uncomfortable truths, the things we weren't seeing. So I was an ego-driven leader, thought I had all the answers. Follow me, guys. I've got it all. It's like, what an idiot. And but it was those sorts of things. But the key bit was that construct that I didn't give myself a choice other than to go down that path.
Again, so powerful. The power of having a deadline, something that cannot be moved. The trauma of hitting rock bottom. I'm mapping kind of these incidences in your life to the leaders listening currently. So again, purpose and vision is the second principle in our 10 principle ScaleX framework. People listening to the show will be very familiar with the emphasis we put on the power of crafting a vision for the future. A deadline isn't something that we've spoken about before. You had a non-negotiable deadline. Is there something practically that we could put in place to create this deadline so that ultimately we reverse engineer from there, but it's non-negotiable? We don't keep pushing this out, that we use that as the catalyst for triggering the change as opposed to waiting on the traumatic event.
Mm-hmm. So look, I mean, the way that I did it was, with my family and and I kind of said to my wife, it's like, look, I'm working 16, 18 hours a day, and I need to keep doing that because scaling a business, it's not a 9 to 5 job, as all your listeners will know, right? You have to be exceptionally obsessed and committed to want to go and do that, to be able to, do the hard yards to make those things happen. So for me, it was that trade-off by saying, for 5 years, I'm just going to go hell for leather at doing this. And the other part of that story is then we're going to go and do these different things here. And so, yeah, that forced leverage. And literally, we created a family vision statement. And we took about 3 months to script it and craft it. And we wrote it out on a piece of paper, and we stuck it on the kitchen wall. We had a big map of the world. That was the leverage right there. And what's really interesting, by the way, So Nicola and I used to run a number of workshops for entrepreneurs to come along to. We don't do them anymore. And basically taking people on this journey. And I remember I spoke to someone earlier this year who said we came on some of your workshops and we did a number of the different steps, but nothing really, lots of things changed in our world, but we didn't go off and do the thing that we really wanted to go and do. And so it really got me thinking about what's the difference between a conversation that changes everything and a surface level conversation. And I remember reading when I was a teenager, the Blind Watchmaker by Richard Dawkins, and he talks about the two levels of understanding: the level of understanding where we hear the words and we kind of get what they mean, and the level of understanding where we feel it in the marrow of our bones. And that's always stayed with me. And when it comes to work, how many conversations do we have where they're just like, yeah, the words level conversation, the thinking level? And yeah, I kind of get what that's all about. And we're bombarded with things from so many different directions. Don't get the chance to dive into depth on that. So for the new book I've just written, create this index. It's called the Conversation Depth Index. And it's how can you go down to that level of conversation level where you are so utterly aligned, whether it's a family team at home, whether it's a work team, just to make sure we understand this in the marrow of our bones. Because I think when you get down to that level of alignment, that level of connectivity, you just unleash this incredible force that just knocks over everything in its way. And the super scalers who smash these things out, they know this already, right? But it's that emotional, it's unleashing that emotional force rather than just that cognitive force that really brings that to bear. So that time spent in really grappling with where we're going and why it matters and getting that marrow of the bones depth. That's exactly what we did as a family, and that's something I always try and replicate in the businesses that I'm involved in as well. So.
This brings me on beautifully to the big topic of teamwork, which we mentioned at the outset. We talked about three things. Comfort zone, I feel we've covered. Teamwork, having these marrow to the bone conversations to actually create a level of connection that is so strong that it will support you navigating through kind of any storm, to use the kind of the yachting analogy. What do you know about teamwork now in terms of forming aligned and strong teams that was very different from you entering the world of KPMG way back? And I say that from you and I both share a background in finance. You went into KPMG, I went into Coopers. That's where the comparisons end, by the way. I continue to work through that. You sailed around the world, and I often reflect back and think I wish I'd sailed around the world. But what do you know? What do you know to be very different now, in terms of creating teams that's different from the world of work that you entered back in the 90s?
Yeah. So look, I think I've gone from what I would call a numbers-centric approach to a people-centric approach is the headline. Back then, and it's interesting. So Coopers back in the day used to sponsor a boat actually in the yacht race for the version before I did it.
I didn't get on it, unfortunately.
Back then for me, it was and having trained as an accountant, it was all about numbers first, driving the results. And it was the same thing on that first yacht race. We were driving the boat for numbers. People are an afterthought, right? We were just like chucking people in the hopper and drive them as hard as they can until they collapse, and then put someone else in there. And it was that whole numbers first approach. Now all the different experiences that I've had led me that the most powerful thing you can do, one person at a time, is help each person on your team to unlock what is the thing that they are exceptional at doing. Everyone's got an incredible piece to play in this. And I think the journey for us as leaders is helping each person in our team to really understand and appreciate the things that they are just brilliant at, and giving people that compassion for themselves, almost like, what's something that you love about yourself? I know that's an unusual word to use in a business, in a conversation about scaling businesses. But I think that if each individual person feels that sense of strength, the platform they're standing on is really solid, and they don't feel like they are under attack. And that's really hard, by the way, in our world of comparison, right? Because comparison's all around us. So it's counterculture. But I think that's what we need to do, is to help each person unlock that thing that they are brilliant at. And to have people each feeling safe, that they can contribute that part, so they belong, they feel they're a part of the team. Exactly what we had to do. That's the only way we got, around the world with my non-sailing wife and our three kids, was to be able to help each person see what's the role that they have to play, and feel part of the team. It's very easy to put a lot more words around that, but that's right at the heart of it. Helping each person feel good about the contribution they're making, the value that they're bringing, and just pointing them towards the struggle, the challenge, and just see what magic comes up when they do that.
That is such a powerful question. What do you love about yourself? I would invite you, if you're not driving at the moment, to stop what you're doing and take a couple of moments just to think about that question, because it speaks directly to another wonderful guest that I had on the show and the work that he has devoted his life to, Gay Hendricks, who wrote the wonderful book, The Big Leap, and his work around supporting people to find their zone of genius. We all have this, and what I'm hearing from you, Caspar, I kind of love that analogy, having come from an engineering, being a CEO of an engineering company for years, chucking people in the hopper. It was a number first approach, and I literally have a view in my head of all of these people just going into the hopper until they're done, and then throw more in. I can relate to this. It resonates so strongly. That question, what do you love about yourself, is so, so powerful in supporting people to ultimately unlock their zone of genius, which very often isn't evident to them. But what I'm hearing from you, it's incumbent in all those who have the privilege of leading others to actually help the people that they're leading to unlock their genius. And we can start with that one question of, what do you love about yourself? I'm going to indulge myself further here and be greedy and ask, have you any other really powerful questions like that, which supports this kind of creating this thread to unlock a person's potential? What are some of the other go-to questions here?
I will share that, but let me just add another thought to what you just said there, linking one of the other concepts. So often we do these the strengths things and the psychometric things in a work context. What I observe around that, to use the Dawkins thing, we're thinking about those things rather than feeling them. The feeling is the marrow of the bones thing. So it's, well, how do we make that shift so that we really embed that and feel that in the marrow of our bones? It's about using our emotions rather than something that we think, oh, well, I've got to navigate out of these difficult emotions and I'm going down these roadblocks all the time, which, that obviously happens. But turning that emotion into the underlying force, unleashing the force that comes from that, from tapping into your emotions. And that's why I think that's why I love the love question, because it forces you to go to that place. And lots of people, when they ask that question, it's like, oh, well, because I'm a really good thinker, I'm a really good problem solver. It's like, well, okay, I get that from a thinking perspective, but tell me about the feeling perspective and those things. So it's shifting gears from that. So the way that I help to embed that, to answer your question, was, if each person go and ask other people who know you really well, and just ask them, what's something I'm really exceptional at doing? The people around you already know what you're really good at doing. They already know. They can see you. You just don't ask the question. We don't have this conversation. It's like, I go and speak to my mates. It's like, can you tell us something I'm really good at? And they'll come up with a whole bunch of jokey responses, of course, and they'll rip it out of me. But after that, there's always something really powerful. Once you get beyond that, and it's triangulating all those data points from other people who know you well and saying, okay, what's the golden thread here? What's the pattern? I think other people see us better than we see ourselves. And we just don't take the time to ask them those questions and to get that feedback and to sit with that and say, actually, maybe I should pivot my identity, my story, my direction around these things here.
Brilliant. We have what we call our 3-2-1 feedback system within our small team. And every month we sit down with a team member. We just rotate and we invite 3 pieces of feedback aligned to our strengths. So 3 things that we're strong at, 2 ways in which we can leverage those strengths for the betterment of others within the business, and 1 thing that we should be aware of that we potentially need to review, to change, to be mindful of. So it's quite powerful, and it's undergirded by everything that you're saying without having had the language of that before we actually implemented that. So
Very powerful.
Challenges today. What do you see happening today in relation to scaling, which requires a different mindset?
I think 2 things come to mind these days. One is just the insane amount of pressure that there is out there. As every leadership team that I speak to, everyone's the same. There's just like, it's off the charts compared to where it was, I think, 30 years ago. The speed of change, the pace of change, and in particular, I think the argumentative is too light a word, adversarial social media world that we live in. Who would want to be a politician these days solving hard problems with the amount of abuse that people get these days online? And when I reflect that, I think so much of that stuff is probably written by bots rather than by human beings. I think it would do well for a lot of people to remember a lot of that stuff out there is written by AIs rather than the human beings. There's something about that that just normalizes this really sort of aggressive, unpleasant behavior that's just angry. And I think that's a really hard environment to operate in because, to run a business, you've got to stick your head above the parapet, haven't you? You've got to go and put yourself out there. And so I think that one of the answers to that, I think, is that being really conscious, deliberate, intentional around how we manage ourselves, take care of ourselves, so that we can not get blown off track by all that stuff. And it's very easy, isn't it, when someone has an argument with us or someone comes at us, it just fills it does with me, fills my mind, and it's just and there's just so much distraction comes from that. So I think level of challenges from that in particular are off the charts. So therefore, for leaders to do something to meet that with how they find peace of mind. Hence, I think the therapy stuff is really, really helpful. Being in supportive groups where you can share those things with other people, like ScaleX group, obviously. But it's counteracting those things. I'm also very wary as well about. I'm as excited as the next person about AI, but I also think that AI has the risk of making us more stupid as well. In that we all just sort of rely on that for our thinking. I think there's real magic in grappling hard with problems rather than actually outsourcing it all to AI. So I think it's a really fine balance to walk there. So I don't know. Lots of different challenges, and I could dive into more of those. But I think it's just that relentless pressure that we have to be aware of. And actually, the burnout rates are sort of, off the charts from where they've ever been. So it's taking care of ourselves, much more intentionally than we've ever done before.
Bringing everything together if you had to design a big, bold mindset boot camp and there were no limits, no budget constraints, what would the format and structure of that look like? And how would people feel having graduated from that boot camp?
The the word that I would anchor it all around is conversations. And I think relearning how to have conversations, which I know sounds really Janet and John, but what I mean by that is the time and the space to really listen to yourself, to sit with that, to understand what's going on, taking people on a journey through that, take people on a journey through listening to others, being 100% present, listening to somebody else, what's going on for them, not thinking about what you're going to say next, not thinking about, what you're going to do in the next meeting or whatever else. What's the essence of that? It's helping people to connect better with themselves and others. It's human beings what do things, isn't it? And I think a lot of that, we've lost sight of that. So it's the most basic of things. And I think it runs the real risk of just being lost in our very, world like this. So listening to yourself, to others, having those conversations, grappling with hard problems. What's the outcome of that? You feel seen, you feel heard, you feel understood, you feel peaceful, you feel better with yourself. What place do you need to be in to go and build and scale a business, right? Those attributes.
So powerful. So powerful. And I think that's a really nice way to move into our close. This is a question that I pose to all of our guests, and given the fact that you have enjoyed, let's say, this incredible journey of life to date. You're a parent, you're a husband, you're a business leader, you are an adventure seeker, an adventure racer. What 3 timeless takeaways can you share with our audience?
So the first one is the thing that changed everything for me is the home conversation. Look, I know people listening to this, some people will have, brilliant home lives. Some people will have home lives that are challenged and in difficult places. From my experience, and I've been in all those different places, by the way, I've been in the most challenged place you could imagine, and I've been in great places. What I've found is that nothing can give me more joy and nothing can give me more pain than my most intimate relationship. And so the conversation that Nicola and I have to create that strong foundation has been the underpinning of everything that I have done. The thing that I'm most proud of in my life is our relationship. And so the thing that I always the time to take away is just invest more time than you think you need in building that strong, stable home foundation. And for some people that might mean change. For other people, it means actually, what, we need to go deeper into that conversation, to the more marrow of the bones conversation, the listening, all those sorts of things. So first one, strong home foundations. Second thing is that humility, and what was it, sort of, it might be Mark Twain who said, if I could only be right 51% of the time, I'd be the most successful person in the world. And the fact that we always think we're right, don't we? But the Dalio quote, everything changed when I went from saying I'm right to how do I know I'm right. So just accepting we're wrong quite a lot of the time and taking that on the chin. And then just remembering that one conversation can change everything. That's all it needs.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. You mentioned at the outset, Caspar, you are in the process of writing a new book due to be released towards the back end of this year. So tell us a little bit more about that and what's next for you.
Yeah, so that book is, so my first book was called Where the Magic Happens. This book is called Where the Magic Begins. And so it's all about the conversations that can change everything and how do you drive depth into those conversations. and moving out of that surface level. And what I've done is I've selected 15 conversations that have just been pivotal in my world. And there's stories and there's tools and there's models and there's ideas to go deeper into that. It's the book that I've enjoyed writing most. It just literally flew out of me. So I can't wait for that to come out. So that's coming up. Outside of that, yeah, sailing projects, house development plans, kids going off and doing stuff. I don't know, lots of fun things going on. So it's yeah,
Brilliant.
busy, busy times.
Brilliant. Well, and when is that going to be released?
So I think it's September the 18th.
September the 18th. Good on you. Well, I wish you every success with that. If people want to connect with you, find out a little bit more about your wonderful work, where best to reach you, Caspar?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is probably the best place, Caspar Craven. And yeah, come find me there. So
Brilliant. Well, look, I want to thank you for your wonderful humility, your incredible wisdom, your honesty, and certainly the depth of this conversation. I've really enjoyed it today. I wish you every success with everything that you are embarking upon. Anyone who interacts with you, I feel, will be better for it. So I encourage you all listening to go and connect with Caspar and find out a little bit more about this wonderful guy. So take care.
thank you, Brendan. You've had a very generous conversation. So thank you very much.